Welcome to African Folktales by Tammy. Please don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe for more interesting stories. Also share this story to someone who might be interested. Let's get into the story. Adamu wiped the sweat from his brow as the harsh sun of Dambe bore down on him. The rhythmic clang of his hammer echoed through his small, dilapidated workshop. His tools were old, his clothes worn, and the dusty environment matched the exhaustion etched on his face. For over 10 years, Adamu had labored as a mechanic, yet he had little to show for it. The harder he worked, the further success seemed to drift away as if mocking his every effort. He lived in a one-room apartment on the outskirts of Dambe, a town where dreams often died in the suffocating grip of poverty. His small income barely covered rent, food, and the occasional spare part for his aging tools. But Adamu had one source of joy in his life, his younger sister Halima. Halima, just 18, was the light of his world. Despite their struggles, she remained hopeful and optimistic. Her laughter filled the tiny apartment they shared, and her dreams of becoming a teacher were the fuel that kept Adamu going. She spent her evenings poring over borrowed textbooks, her bright eyes glistening with determination. Adamu, she would often say, one day we'll leave this life behind. I'll be a teacher, and you'll have a big workshop of your own. Just wait and see. Adamu would smile and nod, but deep inside her words stung. He wanted to provide for her, to give her the life she deserved, but every passing day made him feel like he was failing. One sweltering afternoon, as Adamu worked under the hood of an old car, he heard the hum of a luxurious SUV pulling up to his shop. He straightened up, wiping his hands on a rag, as a tall, sharply dressed man stepped out of the vehicle. The man exuded confidence and wealth, his tailored suit glinting in the sunlight. "You must be Adamu," the man said, his voice smooth and commanding. "I've heard you're the best mechanic in this area." Adamu was taken aback. Praise was rare in his line of work. "Yes, sir, how can I help you?" "My name is Dominic," the man said, extending a hand. "My car's been making a strange noise." "Think you can fix it?" Adamu nodded and got to work. As he inspected the car, Dominic began to talk. "You know, I wasn't always this successful," Dominic said, leaning casually against the car. "I used to struggle just like you, barely making enough to survive." Adamu glanced up, curiosity piqued. "What changed?" Dominic smiled knowingly. "I found the right path, a ministry that turned my life around. The altar of divine elevation. They teach you how to unlock your destiny and achieve success beyond your wildest dreams." Adamu hesitated. He had heard of churches promising miracles, but he had never paid them much attention. Yet something about Dominic's tone and the way he carried himself made him listen. "It's not like any other church," Dominic continued. "The prophet there, Prophet Emmanuel, he's a man of vision. He helps people break free from poverty and find their true purpose." "I'm living proof," Dominic handed Adamu a glossy flyer. The name "The Altar of Divine Elevation" was printed in bold, along with images of smiling congregants and testimonials of miraculous turnarounds. Adamu stared at the flyer, his grease-stained hands smudging the edges. The promises seemed too good to be true, but his desperation outweighed his skepticism. Maybe this is the answer, Adamu thought as he finished repairing Dominic's car. As Dominic drove away, leaving behind a generous payment, Adamu couldn't shake the man's words. That evening he sat on the edge of his rickety bed, the flyer in his hands. Halima was asleep, her soft breathing the only sound in the room. He thought about her dreams, her unyielding hope, and the sacrifices she made daily. If there was even a sliver of truth in Dominic's words, wasn't it worth exploring? The next Sunday, Adamu dressed in his best clothes, a faded shirt and trousers, and made his way to the address on the flyer. As he approached the towering structure of the Altar of Divine Elevation, his heart pounded in his chest. The church was unlike anything he had ever seen. Marble steps gleamed under the morning sun, and the sound of vibrant music filled the air. Adamu stood at the entrance, clutching the flyer. This could be the beginning of a new chapter, he thought. With a deep breath, he stepped inside, unaware of the dark path that awaited him. The moment Adamu stepped into the towering structure of the Altar of Divine Elevation, he felt overwhelmed. The opulence was staggering. Marble floors reflected the light from golden chandeliers. and the walls were adorned with intricate patterns that shimmered as if touched by divine hands. The hall was packed with congregants, all dressed in their finest clothes, their faces radiating joy and hope. It was as though the struggles of the outside world had no place here. Adamu found a seat in the back, feeling out of place among the well-dressed attendees. He clutched the flyer Dominic had given him, his calloused fingers creasing its glossy surface. The air buzzed with anticipation as the choir erupted into a powerful hymn. The sound was captivating, and Adamu couldn't help but be drawn into the energy of the moment. The music stopped abruptly, and a hush fell over the crowd. All eyes turned to the pulpit as a man in an immaculately tailored suit strode onto the stage. He was tall, with a commanding presence and a voice that filled the room without effort. This was Prophet Emmanuel. "Welcome to the altar of divine elevation," he boomed, his voice carrying both authority and warmth. "Today is the day your life changes forever." The congregation erupted into cheers, but Adamu sat quietly, observing. There was something magnetic about the prophet, something that made even skeptics lean in to listen. Prophet Emmanuel's sermon was unlike anything Adamu had heard before. He spoke of breaking the chains of poverty, unlocking hidden potentials, and achieving success beyond imagination. His words resonated deeply with Adamu, who felt as though the prophet was speaking directly to him. "Some of you here have struggled for years," the prophet said, his piercing gaze scanning the crowd. "You've worked hard, yet nothing seems to work. But I tell you today, your breakthrough is here." As the congregation erupted into another round of applause, Prophet Emmanuel raised his hand, silencing them. He pointed directly at Adamu, who froze in his seat. "You young man," the prophet said, his voice calm but firm. "Stand up." Adamu hesitated before slowly rising to his feet. All eyes were on him, and he felt a mix of fear and hope. "What's your name?" the prophet asked. "Adamu," he replied, his voice barely above a whisper. "Adamu," the prophet said with a smile, "I see greatness in you. Your struggles are about to end. The heavens have chosen you for elevation." The congregation erupted into cheers again, and Adamu felt a flicker of hope ignite in his chest. After the service, as people began to leave, Dominic approached Adamu with a wide smile. "I told you this place was special, didn't I?" Adamu nodded, still trying to process everything that had happened. "Come with me," Dominic said. "The prophet wants to see you." Adamu followed Dominic to a private chamber behind the pulpit. The room was lavishly decorated with velvet chairs, gold-framed mirrors, and a faint scent of incense in the air. Prophet Emmanuel sat at a desk, reviewing some documents. He looked up and smiled warmly as Adamu entered. "Adamu," he said, gesturing for him to sit, "you have a rare aura, the kind of aura that attracts greatness. But you've been held back by forces beyond your control." Adamu nodded, unsure of what to say. "I can help you," the prophet continued. "But true elevation requires commitment and faith. Are you ready to take that step?" Adamu hesitated. He didn't fully understand what was being asked of him, but the desperation to change his life overpowered his doubts. "Yes," he said finally. Prophet Emmanuel's smile widened. "Good. We'll meet again soon. Dominic will guide you." As Adamu left the chamber, Dominic patted him on the back. "Welcome to the path of elevation, my friend. You won't regret this." But as Adamu walked home that night, his excitement was tinged with unease. The grandeur of the church, the prophet's charisma, and the promises of success had captivated him. But a small voice in the back of his mind whispered warnings he couldn't quite ignore. Little did he know he had taken his first step into a world far darker than he could imagine. Adamu's visit to the altar of divine elevation had stirred a whirlwind of emotions within him. The prophet's promises of success and transformation gave him hope, but the cryptic words about commitment and faith lingered uneasily in his mind. When Dominic called to arrange a private meeting with Prophet Emmanuel, Adamu was both intrigued and apprehensive. This meeting could be the key to the life he had always dreamed of, but something about it felt uncertain. On the appointed evening, Dominic led Adamu through a side entrance of the church. They descended a staircase into a quiet, dimly lit room. The change from the grandeur of the main sanctuary to the subdued atmosphere of this space was striking. Adamu noted the solemn expressions of the small group gathered there and felt a shiver run through him. Prophet Emmanuel stood at the center, his presence calm yet commanding. "Welcome, Adamu," he said warmly. "Tonight marks the beginning of your transformation. The path to true success requires faith, dedication, and a willingness to make sacrifices." Adamu's heart raced as he heard the word sacrifices. "What do you mean by sacrifices?" he asked hesitantly. The prophet's smile was steady. "To elevate one's life, certain things must be let go. Think of it as an act of faith, releasing what binds you to make room for what will lift you higher." The group began to chant softly, their voices blending into a rhythmic harmony that seemed to fill the room. Adamu was invited to stand at the center of the gathering. His hands trembled slightly as Prophet Emmanuel placed a hand on his shoulder. "This is your first act of commitment," the prophet explained. "It symbolizes your readiness to embrace a brighter future. Trust the process, Adamu." Adamu was handed a small token, which he was instructed to place in a ceremonial box. As he did, he felt the weight of the moment. The group's chanting grew louder, their words speaking of prosperity, breakthrough, and transformation. When the ritual concluded, Prophet Emmanuel smiled and spoke gently. "You have taken the first step toward unlocking your potential, Adamu. The journey ahead requires trust and patience. Remember, the greater the faith, the greater the reward." Adamu left the meeting feeling conflicted. On one hand, he was inspired by the prophet's words and the promises of success. On the other, the peculiar nature of the gathering left him with a lingering sense of unease. Days later, Dominic visited Adamu at his workshop. His expression was serious as he relayed the prophet's message. "The time has come for you to demonstrate your faith further," Dominic said. "True elevation requires letting go of something valuable. It is a test of your readiness for the rewards ahead." Adamu's brow furrowed. "What exactly does that mean?" he asked cautiously. "It means releasing what holds you back," Dominic replied, his tone firm but calm. "Every member of the circle has taken this step, and it's the reason they are living extraordinary lives today." Amu was torn. He wanted to walk away from it all, to return to his life as it was, but the thought of giving up on his dreams and on Halima's future held him back. For days he wrestled with the decision, his mind consumed with conflicting thoughts. That evening, as Halima sat by the small window of their home, she looked over at Adamu with concern. "You've been quiet lately," she said softly. "Is something troubling you?" Adamu forced a smile, shaking his head. "No, nothing at all," he replied, though the unease in his heart was growing heavier. Eventually, Adamu made his choice, convincing himself that the journey he had embarked on was for a greater purpose. He returned to the church, determined to move forward. Prophet Emmanuel welcomed him warmly, commending his faith. "You are on the brink of greatness, Adamu," he said. "Trust the process, and everything you desire will come to you." The evening's proceedings were solemn, with prayers and symbolic gestures that reinforced Adamu's commitment to his journey. As the gathering concluded, Adamu felt a mix of anticipation and trepidation. He had stepped deeper into a world he barely understood, and there was no turning back. In the days that followed, Adamu's life began to change. His workshop attracted new paying clients, and unexpected opportunities started appearing. It seemed as though the promises of the prophet were coming true. But with each step towards success, Adamu felt a growing weight in his heart. At night, his mind replayed the words of the prophet, and his unease lingered like a shadow. Though his external circumstances improved, an inner conflict began to take root, and he found himself questioning the cost of the journey he had undertaken. Adamu's life took an unexpected turn after his renewed commitment to the altar of divine elevation. His once struggling workshop transformed into a bustling hub of activity. Clients arrived in droves, some from distant places, offering lucrative deals he could have only dreamed of. Money flowed easily, and for the first time in his life, Adamu felt what it meant to succeed. In a matter of weeks, he moved out of his modest apartment into a spacious home in a well-to-do neighborhood. He bought new tools, upgraded his workshop, and hired assistants to handle the growing demand. People in Dambe began to speak of him with admiration, wondering how a man who had struggled for years had suddenly found favor. But amidst his newfound success, Adamu's heart remained heavy. It started with whispers in the dead of night. At first, they were faint, almost indistinct, but as days turned into weeks, the whispers grew louder. They seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere at once, calling his name. Admu, the voice was soft but unmistakable. It bore a familiarity that sent chills down his spine. He dismissed it as exhaustion. With so many new responsibilities, he reasoned his mind was simply overworked. But the whispers did not stop. Then came the shadows. At night, as he walked through his expansive new home, Adamu felt as though he was not alone. In mirrors and darkened corners, he began to see fleeting images, figures that disappeared the moment he turned to face them. One night he saw her. Halima's reflection stared back at him from a mirror in his bedroom. Her face was as he remembered it, innocent, kind, but her eyes were filled with sorrow. She didn't speak, but her gaze pierced through him and Adamu froze in place, unable to move. When he finally gathered the courage to turn, the room was empty. Adamu fell to his knees, trembling. "This isn't real," he whispered to himself. "It's just my imagination." But deep down he knew the truth. In desperation, Adamu returned to Prophet Emmanuel. He explained the voices, the shadows, and the visions of Halima. The prophet listened intently, his face calm and composed. "You are experiencing the trials of elevation," Prophet Emmanuel said. "Great blessings come with great tests. The whispers you hear are merely distractions from your path. Ignore them, and you will continue to rise." Adamu nodded, trying to take comfort in the prophet's words, but the unease in his heart refused to leave. As the weeks passed, the occurrences grew more intense. Halima's voice now echoed through the halls of his home, calling his name in sorrowful tones. He began to see her not just in mirrors, but in his dreams and even in broad daylight. She appeared at the foot of his bed, in the shadows of his workshop, and on the streets as he drove through Damb. "Why Adamu?" she would ask, her voice filled with heartbreak. Adamu tried to shut it out, immersing himself in his work and the comforts of his wealth, but the haunting presence of his sister followed him everywhere. One evening, as he sat alone in his office, Halima's voice filled the room. "You thought you could escape," she said softly. "But some things cannot be undone." Adamu stood abruptly, his chair toppling over. "Leave me alone," he shouted, his voice trembling. "I did this for us, for you." The room fell silent, but Adamu knew it wasn't over. His hands trembled as he realized the weight of his actions was catching up with him. For all his wealth and success, Adamu felt emptier than ever. The luxurious home, the booming business, the admiration of others, none of it could fill the void left by his decisions. He began to question the path he had taken and the promises of the altar of divine elevation. Adamu's once bright future now felt shrouded in darkness, and he could not shake the feeling that the cost of his success was far greater than he had anticipated. The whispers, the shadows, and the visions were relentless reminders of a price he could never truly repay. Adamu's wealth and success had transformed him into a figure of admiration in Dambe, but his nights were plagued with torment. The once vibrant man now carried the weight of his actions like an invisible shroud. Halima's voice grew louder, her presence more tangible, and the line between reality and illusion blurred with each passing day. Unable to endure the haunting any longer, Adamu returned to the altar of divine elevation, determined to uncover the truth behind the whispers and shadows that plagued him. He confronted Dominic, who had always been his guide within the church. "Dominic, something is wrong," Adamu said, his voice trembling. "I can't sleep, I can't think. I see her everywhere. I need answers." Dominic's expression remained calm, almost indifferent. "These are trials, Adamu. Everyone who walks this path faces challenges. Stay strong and your rewards will continue to grow." But Adamu was no longer convinced. The hollow reassurances did nothing to ease the gnawing guilt that consumed him. He demanded to speak with Prophet Emmanuel, who agreed to meet him in private. In the dimly lit chamber beneath the church, Adamu faced the prophet. The room, adorned with candles and symbols, now felt suffocating. "Prophet," Adamu began, his voice shaking, "I did everything you asked. I followed the path, but something is wrong." "She won't leave me alone." Prophet Emmanuel's expression remained serene. "Who do you speak of?" Halima, Adamu whispered, his throat tightening. I see her, I hear her voice. She's haunting me. The prophet sighed, folding his hands on the table before him. Adamu, elevation is not without cost. What you are experiencing is simply the past trying to hold you back. You must release these feelings and embrace your destiny. Adamu's frustration boiled over. Release these feelings. I gave up everything. And now I can't even have peace. The prophet's calm demeanor faltered slightly, a flicker of irritation crossing his face. Be careful, Adamu, he warned. Doubt is the enemy of progress. Do not let it destroy you. Adamu left the church more unsettled than ever. That night, as he lay in bed, Halima's voice returned, louder and more sorrowful than before. Adamu, she said, her voice echoing through the room. Why did you betray me? I didn't betray you, he whispered into the darkness, tears streaming down his face. I did it for us, for a better life. Suddenly, the temperature in the room seemed to drop. Adamu felt a chill crawl down his spine as Halima's figure materialized at the foot of his bed. Her face was pale, her eyes filled with sorrow and accusation. You did it for yourself, she said, her voice steady and cold. And now you must face the truth. Adamu bolted upright, his heart pounding. The room was empty, but her voice lingered in his ears. Unable to ignore the signs any longer, Adamu decided to uncover the full truth about the church. He returned to the altar of divine elevation late one night, sneaking through the side entrance and descending into the basement. What he found there froze him in place. The room was filled with relics and items that belonged to others, photographs, personal belongings, and strange artifacts. Each item seemed tied to a name or face that Adamu vaguely recognized. In the center of the room stood an altar, its surface stained and worn. The symbols etched into its sides matched those he had seen during his initiation. Adamu's stomach churned as he realized what the sacrifices truly meant. Prophet Emmanuel's words echoed in his mind. True elevation requires letting go of something precious. Adamu's breathing quickened as he pieced it all together. The visions, the whispers, and the shadows weren't mere hallucinations. They were the echoes of what had been taken. Suddenly, he heard footsteps behind him. He turned to see Dominic and a group of men entering the room. You shouldn't be here, Adamu, Dominic said, his voice cold. Adamu stepped back, his hands trembling. What is this place? What have I done? This is the path you chose, Dominic replied. And there is no turning back. The men advanced, their expressions stern, as Adamu stumbled toward the exit. His mind raced with panic, and as he fled into the night, the weight of the truth pressed down on him. Adamu now knew he had been part of something far darker than he had ever imagined. The rewards he had received came at a cost far greater than he was willing to pay. But escaping the grip of the altar of divine elevation would not be so simple. Adamu's world began to unravel completely after his chilling discovery in the basement of the altar of divine elevation. Though he managed to flee that night, the truth of his actions followed him relentlessly. Halima's presence became more vivid and unrelenting, her voice echoing through his home and her image appearing even in broad daylight. His once luxurious life now felt like a prison of his own making. One fateful night, Adamu awoke to find his home eerily silent. The usual hum of the city beyond his windows was gone, replaced by a deafening stillness. As he sat up in bed, a cold breeze swept through the room, though the windows were shut. Adamu. The voice was unmistakable. It was Halima's, but this time it wasn't sorrowful. It was resolute, as though she had come to claim something owed. Adamu froze as her figure materialized at the foot of his bed, more vivid than ever before. Her expression was a mix of pain and anger. Why, Adamu? She asked, her voice steady but filled with emotion. You sacrificed me for wealth, but was it worth it? Look at what you've become. Tears streamed down Adamu's face as he fell to his knees. I didn't know, he whispered, trembling. I didn't understand what I was doing. Halima shook her head. You knew, brother. You knew the cost, but you chose to look away. Now you must pay. As her figure faded, a sudden heat filled the room. Adamu turned to see flames creeping across his luxurious curtains, engulfing the walls and furniture. The fire spread rapidly, and though he tried to escape, the door wouldn't budge. Smoke filled the air, and Amu fell to the floor, coughing and gasping for breath. The last thing he saw before losing consciousness was Halima's face in the flames, her eyes filled with sorrow and finality. Adamu awoke in the rubble of his once grand home. He had survived the fire, but everything he owned was gone. His fortune had vanished overnight, and he was left with nothing but the clothes on his back. Word spread quickly through Dambe of the mysterious fire that destroyed the home of the once successful mechanic. People whispered about how his rise to wealth had always seemed too sudden, too unexplained. Some speculated it was divine retribution, while others spoke of curses and the consequences of greed. Determined to make amends, Adamu sought to expose the truth about the altar of divine elevation. He shared his story with anyone who would listen, revealing the dark practices of the church and its leader, Prophet Emmanuel. But the prophet was untouchable. His connections in high places silenced any attempts to investigate the church. Adamu found himself isolated, abandoned by the same people who had once admired him. Those who had benefited from their association with him now avoided him, fearing they too might be implicated in his downfall. One stormy evening, Adamu returned to the ruins of his home. He stood amidst the charred remains, reflecting on everything he had lost, not just his wealth but his humanity. He thought of Halima, her dreams, and the betrayal that had brought them both to this point. As lightning illuminated the dark sky, Adamu saw her figure one last time, standing in the distance. Her expression was no longer sorrowful or angry, it was peaceful. "Rest now, Adamu," she said softly. "Your time will come, and justice will prevail." Her image faded into the storm, leaving Adamu alone in the ruins. The story of Adamu's rise and fall became a cautionary tale in Dambe, a chilling reminder of the dangers of unchecked ambition and the price of decisions made in desperation. Though the altar of divine elevation continued its operations, whispers of its dark secrets persisted, casting a shadow over its grandeur. Adamu disappeared soon after, his fate unknown. Some say he left Dami to seek redemption elsewhere, while others believe he met a darker end. But one truth remained: the past has a way of catching up, no matter how far one tries to run. Would you still trust everything behind the pulpit? We've come to the end of this story. Please subscribe to my channel to support me. Thank you.